Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concept series. In this video we're going to look at how to start using the manip stage in MRDCL. You'll find the files used in this video in the folder tab 105. Now we're just going to look at first of all why we use manip. Now manip is a tool that allows you to do calculations on tables that are already incremented. So this is where tables have been incremented and then you want to do something with them to perhaps change them in some way. It might be something simple like adding two rows together to get another row, but any arithmetic that you want to apply to a particular table. So my project here looks quite standard in the data stage. It's got some variables here, question 1, 2, 3 and 4, 4x, gender and age, an integer here, a banner, and then some fairly straightforward crosstabs. Now what I want to do is to go through in this video and show you each of the concepts in the manip stage, and you can see that in the files each of these are commented out at the moment, and we're going to go through these one by one rather than doing the whole run in one go as has been done in most of the videos. In this video we're going to actually just activate one of these manip rows at a time and see what effect it has on the tables. So the first one I want to look at is a very simple one just to show you how manip works, and you can see here what we've got in manip is, if I take these two comments off, this is saying that what I want to do with this table is I want to manipulate table 1, so it's the same sort of format as you would have put up here in the table stage, except it's got an M on the front now, and then to the right of the equal sign it says I'm going to take table 1 and I'm going to multiply it by 2. So I'm actually just doubling the figures. So let's put that back on for a minute, that comment, let's save, let's run, and let's look at our table. And this is the table we get without that multiplied by 2. You can see I've got 5 people in the base, 3, 1 and 1. If I now activate that line of code, take off the comments and run it again, and you can see now I've got exactly double the figures, 10 here, 6, 2 and 2. Now obviously that's not a valid use of the manip stage in MRDCL. I've just done that for illustrative purposes. So let's look at some more practical concepts now. I'm going to put that one back on, and the first one I want to look at is table 6. So let's look at table 6 as it stands at the moment. Let's go to table 6, and you can see at the moment it's a pretty standard table with a rating scale in there, very good through to very poor. And as we scroll down you can see there's a net for the very good, which is the sum of the good and the quite good, which is 3 people. The net of the poor, which is 0, and 1, which is 1 person. Now what you commonly want to do after that is to get a net difference, which is the net good minus the net poor. Now as you can see the manip's not been activated for that, so it's coming out as blank at the moment. What I'm trying to get here is 2 and 40%. So let's look at what we've done to achieve that. I'm going to start in the data stage this time first. So let's scroll down to that, and I want to look at question 4 and just look at that variable definition. And you can see what I've done. At first I pick up the standard codes 1 to 5. I pick up the net, which is codes 1 to 2. Note this will have to be a multivariable because respondents can go into this variable twice now, so anybody who rates good will go in as an individual code and then in the subtotal here. Then I'm picking that 4 and the 5 up together, codes 4 and 5 that is, for the quite poor and the very poor. And then for my net difference, which is the line I put here, or the piece of text I put here, I've set false for that. So I put nobody to go into that category, and I put E on the end. Now the reason that no one's going into that category is that I'm going to use table manip to calculate it. There's no way in the syntax to say I want 1.2 minus 4.5, for example. That's not syntax that MRDCL would recognise. What I actually want to do here is increment the table, get the figure for the number of people in the 1 to 2 category, subtract the number of people in the 4 to 5 category and put it in this row here. So this is going to be, just to count it through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th row is going to be the 6th row minus the 7th row. Now you'll see I've added one label control on the end here. I don't particularly want the figure here, I just want the percentage difference in this particular case. So I've used label control X to achieve that, so that it hides the number. Alright, so let's activate this line of code now and look at what we're doing. And all we're saying is that I want to manipulate table 6, row 8, as being equal to table 6, row 6, and I don't need to repeat the table 6 here. I could repeat #6 in there and it will work perfectly fine, but I don't need to. If I don't put anything in there, it's going to assume I'm talking about the same table. Alright, let's activate that now and see whether it gives me what I want, and go down to table 6 now, and sure enough now I've got a net percentage difference of 40%. So it's taken that 60, taken that 20 and subtracted it for me on the incremented tables to give me 40%. And of course it's done that all the way across all of the columns because I've applied it to every column. I've just said in my script here, let's go down to tables. So in my script here, I've asked it to do this for every row. If I only wanted to do it to the total column, and I don't recommend this because it's not what we'd want, I could say row 6 column 0, so row 8 column 0 is row 6 column 0 minus row 7 column 0, and if I ran that and go down to the table, you'll see that what I've got now is I've got 40% here, but I get dashes all the way here because I only apply the manip code to column 0 and not all of the other columns. Now if that's what you want, that's fine, but I want it to apply to all columns here, so I need to take that off. But it does illustrate that you can do tests on individual columns, but it must all balance. So the manipulation you do must be balanced manipulation. I couldn't say I want to do this for columns 1 to 3 and for columns 2 to 3 and for column 0. That just wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. So that would be an unbalanced manipulation that I couldn't do. Alright, so I'm going to comment that one out now, and I'm going to look at something else now. Now if we go up here, we're going to look at table 7, and table 7 is question 4x filtered on males, and then we've got table 7b, the same table filtered on females. Let's look at Q4x first of all. There's nothing particularly strange about that. It's in fact a repeat of the question above, or the variable above, without any subtotals for net good and net poor, and no subtotal for net different. So it's basically the same information, but now I've got the table filtered on gender 1 and gender 2. Now you'll notice here I'm using a format option called BTS. Now what BTS means is blank table suppression. And actually what I want to do here, I want to suppress any tables where the base in the top left hand cell, the total cell, is less than 3. So I only want to see the tables where the base is 3 or more. So what I'm going to do down here on tables 7a and 7b, if I run these now without my manip code, you'll see that if we go to table 7a, there's the table for males based on 3 people, and here's the table for females based on 2 people. Now I want to suppress the table for females because it's only based on 3 people, it's not based on 3 or more as I want. So what I'm going to do now in manip is I'm going to use a variable. I'm going to uncomment these 4 lines this time. I'm going to define a variable that picks up the base in table 7, row 0, column 0. In other words, the top left cell of the table. Now this might look a bit strange because we probably haven't, you may not have seen defining a variable from a figure in a table. Now I know it's a whole number because it's a base and there's no weighting, so I can use an integer here. If the figures could have decimal places in there, I would need to put in DW, or otherwise it would round it to the nearest integer. So I'm saying I want to define the base, a variable called base, as table 7a, row 0, column 0. Now that I've got that value in a variable, I want to say if the base is less than 3, set the whole of table 7a to zeros. And the reason I'm doing that is I have blank table suppression, and what that will mean is with that format option, which is up here, blank table suppression, because I'm setting it to 0, the whole table to a table of zeros, if the base is less than 3, it will suppress the table. So let's now see what happens. Let's run that. Let's go down to table 7a. Sure enough, I've got my table with males because it fulfills my criteria of 3 or more. But when I scroll down to 7b, we find it's gone, and that's because I've got a base of 2 in the females. I've set it to 0 because the base was less than 3, and the table disappears. Now we can just check that's working okay. If we take off blank table suppression temporarily, I've replaced it with MRDCL, we should find now, I've got an error message coming out, I should find now that if I go to table 7a, I still get the same table. When I scroll down to 7b, even though it's blank, if it's set to blank, it's not been suppressed. So it's working correctly. I'm going to take MRDCL back out, and my table 7b will disappear once more. So that's another case of using manip and using it with variables to test certain conditions. That's a way of suppressing data as well. If you want to suppress any rows in a table that are working on a small base, for example, that's one way of doing it, is to test to see what the base is, perhaps in a table you don't print, and then suppressing some figures as a result of that. And you can do these tests across tables, which is what we'll see in the final example here. And in the final example, I want to look at what we've got in our tables first, just to illustrate what I'm trying to achieve. So table 1 is a table of the brands that were chosen as favourites. So 3 people chose brand B as a favourite, 1 chose D and 1 chose E. If we move down to table 4, this is all the brands considered. So this is the brands that they chose as favourite, or they considered. So all the people in table 1 are in here, but also any other brands that they considered will be in here. Now the table I want to get is I want to find out of the brands that they considered, what percentage were their favourites. So if we look at brand A and B, for example, nobody chose brand A as a favourite, but 3 people chose brand B as a favourite. And if we go down to table 4 here, we'll see that although nobody chose A as a favourite, 4 people chose it as a brand they considered, whereas there was a high conversion rate, you might say, in that 3 people chose B as a favourite and only 4 considered it still. So 75% of the people who chose B did go ahead and choose it as their favourite, but of the brand A, no one did. So this is quite an interesting table. It's some sort of conversion rate of brands considered to the ones they favour, or it could have been a table on actually bought. And what I've done in table 9 is I'm going to calculate what percentage of people actually chose the favourite brand of those that considered it. So let's have a look at table 9 now in the script. So let's go down to table 9. So table 9's been set up as a dummy table here. It's got not increment the table on it. We're going to look at all the other format options that go with it in just a second, but let's look at the principle in manip and then work back. So what we've got here is that table 9 in manip has been defined as row 1 minus dollar. Now row 1 minus dollar means I want it from the first row, excluding the total row, because row 0 is the total row, but from the first row of the table, excluding the total row, dash dollar, dollar means the final row. Now I could have counted the rows up, and if there were 10 brands there and 10 rows, I could have said row 1 dash 10. That would have worked perfectly well, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to use the dollar, which means the last. So table 9 is row 1 to dollar. Remember, it must balance, so we'd expect row 1 to dollar for the other tables, and I'm picking up table 1, row 1 to dollar, and dividing it by table 4, row 1 to dollar, and then I'm multiplying it by 100. Now, there's a couple of tricks in here that maybe not quite as obvious as they seem. What I'm going to actually get by doing that is the percentage, but I'm going to get the percentage where the actual figures would be normally, and the percentages themselves will be absolute nonsense. So for example, to take brand B, which had 3 people that chose it as its favourite and 4 that considered it, I want to calculate 3 divided by 4 and multiply it by 100, which will give me 75%. But it's the figures I'm doing that to, it's not the percentages. And so I need to put a percentage sign out on the figures to make it look good. And that's just one of the options I'm using here. So if you look at the string of formats that I've had to implement here to get this table to work just as I want to, you can see that I put NBTS on here because I don't want to suppress it if the table's blank, and we'll see why that is in a minute. I put NPTR on here because it's not a calculation we want to do on the total row. That would just give 100% because the base row on table 1 and table 4 is the same. It's not a relevant row, so I've removed it. I guess I could have left it there to show the base. It wouldn't have done any harm. I want to set not increment the table, so I don't want to actually increment table 9 at this stage. And PCT is the clever format option. That's saying treat the figures in the tables as a percentage. So even though I'm doing the calculations on the figures, I'm going to come out with a figure that's actually a percentage, put a percentage sign on it so it looks like a percentage to anybody using it. And I've turned off the column percentages. So let's watch that running now and let's see what we get. And go to our final table, and sure enough now we get that 75% conversion rate, whereas it's 0% for brand A, it's 100% for brand D and 33% for brand A. We can just check brand D and E, so we've got 1 and 1. If we go down to table 4, only 1 person considered D, so that would be 100%, whereas 3 people consider D, which makes that 33%. Now just to look at that option again there about the percentage signs coming out. So these are really figures. That 75 is a figure. The percentage sign's only coming out because I'm putting format PCT in there. So let's just tidy this table up before we finish it. It would probably be a good idea to give it a proper title here, because it will just get a question 1's title. I'm going to call it conversion rate. So that would be percentage of favourite as a percentage of percentage considered in that table. If we took that format option off there just temporarily, PCT, and run it again and look at the table, certainly the title looks good now, but you'll see it's just coming out with figures. So that PCT is sort of cheating and putting a percentage sign on the figures. But of course it's a very useful cheat to have. So I'm going to put PCT back in there and run it, and that should be our final table now. And sure enough, there's our final table, which looks correct to me. So that completes this video. You'll find the files in here commented, or the manip statements commented in this file when you use it. And if you're going to work with this, you'll need to uncomment them to replicate what's been shown in this video. But thank you for joining.